I'm back. This is the fine art of self-distancing. If you're just tuning in, live from New York City, and I have a very special guest, one of my dear friends, and I'm a huge fan and have been for so many years, Lucinda Williams. Hello, Lou. What's going
Hey.
on? How you doing? Great to see you.
Great to see you too. I miss you.
I know. I was thinking when we last saw each other, we were on the boat on the Outlaw Country
I
Cruise together in the middle of the
know.
ocean. And
Yeah,
we said goodbye. I think in February we were in a theater in Clearwater, Florida, playing shows.
yeah.
And then I went to Europe, and you went on, and now here we
Mhm.
are. It's a wild time in life in the world.
It is, yeah.
But you've been keeping busy, I see, with stuff,
We
right?
keep it busy, I mean, ironically, during this weird shutdown time, it's given us the time to do a lot of the press stuff for the album, which we wouldn't have had time to do otherwise, because we would have been out of the road right now.
Yeah.
So, or it would have been hard to do all this stuff, and tour at the same time. So that's basically what I've been doing a lot of is, these Zoom things, which is now becoming sort of the new, I've had to get used to it.
Me too. Yeah, this is the first season. I was in my
Yeah,
apartment doing these, and now
it's like a whole new reality. I mean,
I'm in the bar alone,
I
drinking
know.
in Berlin. I'm trying to do these to help out, the clubs that I'm involved in. And we were here rehearsing for the Sunset Kids show. You were standing over there, but it's very ghostly in here by myself. But
Yeah, I know.
it's almost like you're here. But,
Yeah.
when you're doing press for a record and stuff, I know when I'm on the road and you're trying to save your voice, you got sound check and you got the gig,
Yeah.
and then you try to slip it in between taking a shower, doing all the
Right.
it's hard. So to be able to
It
focus, must be
So
cool.
this has been kind of a blessing in that regard, just because it's kind of like all I have to do right now.
Yeah.
And the other thing, it gives me a kind of a schedule, and a reason to, take a shower, put on my makeup and get dressed. It's like I got somewhere to go, kind of thing.
I was listening to the other night on the WFUV. You did like 5 songs and spoke with Rita Houston, and it was strong. Like Rita's voice just was bluesy and just had, for doing these, a lot of people are just moaning into their laptop in their pajamas, and yours like just sounded so real.
Right. Yeah. Well, we've got it all set up. We kind of, I've got Lauren, who works with us, is helping with all this, and she's just a whiz at all this, so she sets it all up. We got a really nice mic, and so it's good to try to do it like this, if you're going to do it. And
it feels like it's a good time to put out a record. In a weird way, I was concerned for my friends that were releasing like once the lockdown happened, and I was trying to push their records even more. And how much I love your new record. We got to hear it on Christmas Eve, a little sneak peek that in the basement. But yeah, I've been such a fan of this particular album. But I feel that right now putting out music, as much as it might have seemed weird, is actually great. I think people really need it, and their attention is with us.
Yeah, that's what I've discovered too. With this album, somebody said that actually when it first, right before it came out, and they said, well, isn't this kind of a weird time to release an album? And Tom stuck, he wanted to get it out, and he stuck with the release date. And a few people were saying that, like, it's kind of a weird time to release an album. But then it came out, and, it was like a blessing. Everybody was saying, thank you for putting this out now. And, we really needed this. And, because for one thing, people have time right now, to really dig into stuff and listen.
Yeah.
We're not distracted with all our normal things.
I think if we use this time right, it's a great time to reset and reflect.
Yeah.
Really feel the standards, and hopefully people will stick with that once we go. I've been seeing animals out and all this nature. People tell me there's mountain lions on the streets of Boulder, and people send me photos of bears dancing in their backyards in upstate New York. And so it's good to see that there's a little bit of a rest for nature, and there's some I think. But it's been nutty. For me, we were in the UK, and we had to come back before they closed us out. Me and the band were in London, and we were supposed to go into Europe, and we just got back into New York before it all was locked down.
Yeah. Wow.
I'd be sleeping in the back room of a pub somewhere, like in.
Well, we've been hearing about this image. I've seen a little bit of it online, but people in New York every day, I guess around 7 or 7:30, and
Everyone's banging pots and pans for
yeah,
the workers.
I
And
love that.
it's getting louder. I mean, they were doing it, in Italy and Spain and singing.
Yeah.
But this has been tremendous. And it used to be
Yeah.
just uptown by the hospitals, and now it's the whole city. And when you're walking the street, you feel really, connected. I mean,
there's a thing, yes, there is a connection that, there's like you said, I mean, there's some good that can come out of this.
Definitely.
If we pay attention and listen,
I always think, being that this is like live from New York and I'm in the Berlin Club and all, I always think about some of the stories he told me, which surprised me when I met you. I mean, we met in a club in New York at the Blue Note. I always tell people makes it sound all jazzy, but it was at a Charlie Watts gig. So it was still kind of rock and roll. And, when I first met you, I was a fan. I had heard your voice on a Steve Earle record, the song, You're Still Standing There. Yeah. And I called up Joey Ramone and told him I heard this great voice, and he said he knew you, and so it felt familiar. And I took, I think, Danita from L7. We went and saw you at the Wiltern Theater.
Oh wow! I didn't know you were
tour. And I was just so blown away at how you talked to the crowd, and you connected. Not only was the band great, but at that time I was in D-Generation, and I just listening to a lot of music that wasn't quote unquote rock in a way. And I felt that what you were doing was really just streety and not definable. And here was this person that had swagger and balls. And, some people might say, oh, is this from the country scene? And right away I knew that you were a rock and roll heart.
Right.
Then we got to talk. And, you told me that in the late 70s you came to New York, like on your own, and lived in the East Village and stuff in the late 70s.
I lived on First Avenue and 2nd Street.
Wow. It's 1 block from here where we are. It's just up the block. I think we've walked by. And you came with your guitar and came here for what? To play music? To New York?
Yeah, I went, because I always wanted to be in New York and be in the Village and the whole thing, but I missed all the scenes. I was just always a little too young to be there when it was really happening, so, I wanted to be in the beatnik scene when that was happening, and then I wanted to be in the folk scene and when Bob Dylan and Phil Oakes were hanging around, in the Village and stuff. So, I had to do my New York thing. So I went up there, and Folk City was still there, and I played there. Yep, Folk City. And, I mean, I didn't have an album out yet or anything, but I played wherever I could, including, which I've told you about, this little place called the Flushing Local Coffee House in Flushing.
Queens, baby, Queens in the house.
And I learned how to do the, whole subway system thing, and I would get on the subway and go to Flushing and, do my little gig with, 3 people in the audience, or, I mean, I played wherever I could. I mean, that's what.
Any songs from that period of time that have been in the last 15, 20 years that you've been with you?
Well, I don't know. Maybe some of them on the Folkways, those 2 Folkways albums, because right around that time was when that first Folkways album came out, So I was doing a lot of other people's songs back then, like Bob Dylan, and, and I was writing my own stuff too, but it started showing up. I think actually maybe the earliest song kind of from that period around there would have been I Lost It. That was on the second Folkways album, and then I re-recorded it for the Car Wheels album. So that would have been around that time period.
Wow. Well, Folk City, across the street exactly from the Blue Note where we met, and it's no longer there. But at that point, I'd seen the Replacements and a lot of bands at Folk City in the 80s, early 80s. But so you're playing there. You told me the story of playing there in the late 70s. And the owner, Mike Perko?
This little old Italian guy. He'd been running it for a long time, almost from the beginning, I think. And, he was friends with all the folk people who'd gone on to become famous, and they never forgot him, though. They would pop in from time to time and say hi. And so there was a guy from Woodstock back then. He lived in Woodstock and was playing around. Really good songwriter, Tom Pacheco. And this is when Dylan was living in Woodstock and all. Anyway, I got, it was a big deal just to open up for me and do 2 or 3 songs, for somebody. So I was opening up for Tom Pacheco, and I did a few songs, and I got off this, everybody was milling around, and Mike Porco comes up to me and he taps me on the shoulder. He goes, Lucinda. He's such a sweetheart. He's like a grandpa or something to everybody, He goes, Lucinda. And I said, what? He goes, I want you to meet a friend of mine. And I'm thinking, okay, I'm going to meet a friend of Mike Porco's. And I turned around and he goes, this is a Bobby. And I went, and it didn't register at first. And then Mike Porco goes, this is a Bobby Dylan. And Bob, I'm just like completely, and there's Bob Dylan sitting at the bar, just real nonchalantly with one of his backup singers, I think, this tall, beautiful Black woman. And they had driven into the village and parked and come in to see Tom Pacheco and say hi to Mike Porco. And, and we got introduced, and I was like, I don't know, 21 or something. And, he was my musical hero.
Wow.
And I mean, I'm not embarrassed to say, it was a big deal for me.
Yeah. And then who would think, then in time you'd go on and tour with Van Morrison and Bob Dylan and do those shows. And you do a great version. I was listening to David Johansen's, I think it's called the Mansion of Fun show on the Loft on Sirius. And I heard one day your version of Positively 4th Street.
Oh God, yeah. I always loved that song.
Yeah. And you sang, you always cover stuff great, I'm such voice, but you really captured that kind of pointed thing that song has. And so. Well,
I imagine him, what he was writing it about, was when he first started getting famous, and there was a little bit of envy, I think. And, he had to deal with that,
I want to go back also. So growing up, you've talked to me about like in the 60s hearing the Rolling Stones, and you were growing up in Arkansas, or were you in Louisiana when you first heard?
Yeah, I was in, I went to junior high and high school in New Orleans. So that was really where, like Neil Young said, all my changes were there, Right. That's where I started. That's where, all that amazing music was coming out, and before we lived in New Orleans, we lived in Baton Rouge. So basically I was there, from 1964 through 1969, which was, it all happened in those years, really, for me.
And your dad was a poet and a lot of writing, and also was at the university.
Yeah, he taught at LSU in Baton Rouge, and then we moved to New Orleans, and he was teaching at Loyola. And so it was the 60s. I was going to an inner city public high school, which was overcrowded and understaffed, and we had this racist principal, and I was always getting in trouble with some of the other kids for speaking out, and I was a teenage activist.
All that soul music down there, it's definitely in your blood. You sing blues and the New Orleans stuff, and just that whole American, roots.
That's all that music was coming in. I was inspired by all kinds of stuff, not just country and folk, but the rock stuff that was the blues-based rock, like the Doors and Cream, and Hendrix was it was just, I hate to sound like, because the age I am, like, ooh, back in the day, but but there was a back in the day. But the same as different generations. The great, the 70s, part of the 70s with the whole punk thing and everything, and so, but that's when I was a teenager. So that's when, that's when you're at that special age, you know, when that music.
Just to think what happened with rock music between 64 and 69 and all the different stuff that would go
Yeah.
on in those years. They're really, you know, so much had happened. And in these years, I feel like time goes on in 10 years, like, you know, Nirvana is a while ago, but it doesn't sound like something different. When in 1977, I was listening to Kiss, and even though I was young, I was probably 10, Sgt. Pepper was 1967, and that was like 10 years before, but it seemed like Benjamin Franklin to me. And that's not just because I was young, but because so much had happened, you know.
Yeah.
It seemed like, you know, this 10 years from Sgt. Pepper,
Right.
Kiss Alive too, or whatever. But, you know, I think now you have to look. I mean, there's a lot of great music. Is there stuff that you're listening to now?
There's a lot of great music. Yeah. Well, one of my favorite albums is by the band War on Drugs.
Oh yeah.
Which I just love their last album. And I was a little late to discover them, but that was one of those albums that you know, just grew on me. And there's another guy I really like. He's a British UK guy, British guy. He goes by the name Fink. I don't know if you've checked him out, Fink. And he was a DJ at first. And then he always wanted to, you know, he came from that whole, you know, cool DJ thing world. But he wrote songs and he started putting these albums out, and he didn't even want to tell people it was him because he thought, what are my DJ fans going to think and all this? And it's really cool stuff. It's like a kind of acoustic based, but it's got this, you know, kind of rock cool sound to it. You know, his stuff's really interesting. And also Sharon Van Etten.
Yeah, she's great.
I love her. I think she's doing amazing work. I think she's a great songwriter.
She just did a duet with Josh Homme of the Elvis Costello, the Nick Lowe song, What's So Funny About Peace, Love, and Understanding. Mm-hmm. And the two of them, it just came out the other day. And it's a great video, great version of that song, the two of them.
Yeah.
I thought that was super cool. I want to go back to a funny story. Speaking of your dad, I know you used to, you know, share your lyrics with him, and sometimes he, you know, would be very supportive. Sometimes he had strong opinions. You've told me, you know, if you're using a word twice or this and that. Yeah. But these things that stick in my mind from nights that we've had a few drinks and told old stories. Your dad, I don't know how old you were, but suddenly Bukowski comes to speak at the school.
Oh yeah, that I wasn't at home. That was right after I left home. And my dad told me the story about it. Unfortunately, I wasn't there because I was already out on my own. But yeah, he was a visiting poet, you know, because the whole Portuguese world, you know, it's a pretty small world, and you know, as a poet, you go to different college towns and give a reading. And then afterwards, there's always a party at somebody's house, one of the writer or professor's house. So this was in Fayetteville, Arkansas, and the parties would either always be at my dad's house or Jim Whitehead's house, who was another writer. And usually they were at my dad's house. And I was there for a lot of them. And I tell you what, I mean, rock and roll guys can party, but man, these writers, I mean, you know, they can drink you under the table in no time flat. You know, I mean, we're talking bourbon, whiskey, scotch, up till 3 a.m, you know, smoking cigarettes and talking and stuff.
Wow.
Anyway, so yeah, there were some wild times. So this was one of those times where he came to Fayetteville and gave a reading, and then there was a party at my dad's house. And apparently the story my dad told was there was an attractive woman there there was a woman there who Bukowski was attracted to. And he wasted no time in, you know, trying to hit on her. And apparently the way he did it was something like, you know, you have great legs. Now, this was in the height of the feminist movement, you know, so there's a lot of this whole, you know, political correctness crap going on. So apparently this woman was, you know, offended. And she goes, well, why don't you let me see your legs? or something. And apparently Bukowski, you know, pulled down his pants and said, okay, you know, like that, it didn't faze him at all. And guess what? They ended up getting it on downstairs in the basement. Yeah, later.
Must have liked his legs.
You know, I think she appreciated his, you know, kind of in your face Bukowski thing, you know, but he writes about it in that book, Women.
Oh, wow.
That he wrote. Yeah.
That's great. So what kind of influence, if any, has your dad had on your writing, do you feel?
Oh, well, you know, I feel like he really taught me about the economics of writing. He's a great editor too. That was one thing that he did, you know, besides writing poetry. And I've grown to really, I like that part of it where you go in and kind of chip away and, you know, make it better, you know, not just spit it out there, but, you know, really construct it and make it would this word work better than another one? You know, I would show him something and he would say, well, maybe you should change, you know, thee to my or something. It'd just be one little word and it would change the whole thing, you know.
Well, you were great like that with me when you're producing the recent Kids. We spent a lot of time in the kitchen where I'll write 6 verses.
Exactly, yeah.
Sat there and I was like, I got to go to the lyric doctor. And
that's where I got that. I learned that from my dad just over time. You know, it was kind of like he was like my mentor. It was kind of like an apprenticeship in a way, you know, not officially, but, you know, I always, you know, we had a very strong bond, my dad and I. So, you know, I wanted him to be happy with what I did. I wanted to please him.
Yeah.
And, you know, that can have its ups and downs. But in this case, you know, I have very high standards, you know, because he did, you know. So anyway, so I started showing him things and, you know, but he could be, I remember, you know, he was very adamant about the difference between songwriting and poetry. Right. And I remember one of the things back in the 60s, some of the college students of his would come over the house and hang out and, you know, have some drinks and talk and stuff. And I remember them getting into a debate with my dad about whether Bob Dylan was a poet or a songwriter, you know, and my dad would say, no, he's a songwriter. Right. And they'd be like, but he's just poet, he's a poet. He's poetic, my dad would say, but he's a songwriter, you know, it's a different thing and all that, which I came to understand when I, you know, I tried, you know, I think I was a little hesitant about trying to write poetry with my dad there, you know. At one time I wrote something I thought might be a poem and I let him look at it and he sent me back a note. I sent it to him and he sent me back a note and said, honey, I think it wants to be a song, you know. So that was kind of like, the message I got was, he's the poet, I'm the songwriter, you know.
Yeah, well, some lyrics can really stand alone if you recite them. And
that's true, yeah.
But
he was kind of a traditionalist in a way, my dad, you know, even though he was very, very progressive, but he sort of had, you know, traditional views about
that's
certain.
Kind of a great combination, yeah. I think that, you know, being around you over the years, you know, doing shows or just hanging out, just getting to know you as a friend. And I just noticed that, you know, your heart is so big, really like community, like the people in your road crew, the way you are with fans and journalists, and you're just very open. And I noticed that when we first met that night that, you know, you were humble but gracious, but that you just really loved people. And the few nights that we've thrown some after parties and you just like, wow, this is like a happening. And I feel that, you know, obviously in the writing, and one of the times, and a few times I've seen you've said to the crowd, you know, these songs are about real people. These are real characters. And sometimes you've protected the people, like on the Car Wheels tour, you didn't say the names, or you might, you know, protect the guilty as we do.
Exactly.
But it felt so good. And when I first saw you play the first time, you did Lake Charles, and you told the story about a guy who came from one place but said he was something else. And that's so much about the person in that simple thing. And there's an empathy and a love to these characters who are even messed up in a lot of these records, like Car Wheels. A lot of the characters are people that struggle, but you find their beauty. What's your writing process like? Do you start with lyrics, or that old question?
I start with lyrics. I have a habit, like probably like most songwriters, I guess, or poets, where a line might come to me, or I might hear something somebody says in a bar.
Sure.
I've got a bunch of cocktail napkins with lines on them. I've always thought it'd be kind of a cool idea to take those cocktail napkins with different little snippets of things, and put them in a book or something, like a coffee table book.
Yeah, I've seen you on the bar writing during
exactly.
shows.
That's what remember when you were playing at the Hotel Cafe in LA a few years ago, and I was so inspired. I was sitting at the bar and I was writing something on a napkin, and
journalist, I think that's how we got here now. Saw you writing and said, we'll do this article on Lucinda.
So, I save everything, until I've used it in a song. So I've always got snippets and things, and I've got this big folder that I keep everything in, and I've actually got everything filed now because I had so much stuff that, I would put it under a title, and then, so then when I get in the mood, I'm in the writing mode, I get all that out and, pull it out, kind of see what happens. I hate, sounding so, like it's this big magical process, and, but to be quite honest, I'm not really that disciplined about it, which my dad wouldn't like to hear me say.
It works. How many songs, how many records?
I used to worry about it, but then I realized that's just what works for me, and everybody's different. A lot of times I wish I could be one of those people who, sets your alarm, you get up and you write from 10 in the morning till 3 in the afternoon every day. People swear by that and say, even if you don't come up with anything, just stare at a blank piece of paper. That's not what I do, but then when I get in that writing mode, then I'm in it. Then I'm just like going, like a mad woman, for 2 or 3 weeks straight. And that's all I do. So it kind of, it just comes in like a big swoop like that. But that isn't to say that I'm not always, I'm not always sitting and applying myself, but I'm always aware, and I'm always getting ideas, and I'm always thinking of things and writing them down. So to me, that's part of the process too, like probably, I sort of imagine, Bukowski maybe doing a certain amount of that, the bar as your office kind of thing.
Yeah. Say something. I have something. Is there? I never talked to you about films that much. Is there a movie or a couple movies that have really affected your life? Doesn't have to be from any time period.
Oh yeah. Well, the one that always comes to mind actually is from a Flannery O'Connor novel called Wise Blood.
Okay. John Huston film?
You have to see that. It's directed by John Huston.
John Huston, yeah.
Houston, sorry. God, take that out where I said Houston. John Huston. I know why I said Houston, because we were talking about this the other day, and somebody said Houston, and then somebody said, no, that's a street in New York.
Well, that's how you can always tell that people aren't from here.
Because I say, yeah, exactly.
I was on Houston Street, and you're like, oh, it's Houston. I was in Greenwich Village.
So anyway, it's a Southern Gothic novel written by Flannery O'Connor. It was made into a film. And, she was a master at, taking broken people and writing about them and being empathetic with these, dark, broken characters, and I was as influenced and inspired as much by her writing as I was, any songwriter, because I read her books, everything I could get my hands on, when I was 15, 16. So, you know, but anyway, so yeah, that'd be
a big one.
Those are the kind of films I like, you know, that films that deal with, you know, kind of probably not the big money sellers, money makers. We're watching one right now actually with Billy Bob Thornton, you know, and Dwight Yoakam and William Hurt.
Oh wow!
So called Goliath. That's really good. It's again, you know, it's got that biblical kind of thing going on in the title, and you know, references to that. You know, like inner struggles. You know, I like films that deal a lot with that, with you know, people and the inner struggles of people, and that's what I like to write about too. You know.
I got to check it out. Yeah.
Yeah.
Another question. This is one. Is there a song, you know, that you always love playing? Is there one or two that from the whole catalog of yours that you're like, you know what, that this holds a special place?
Yeah.
I was always curious.
I usually, a lot of times there are ones that I don't, you know, I don't get to play as often live because, you know, I have more ballads than I do rock songs, which is something I've always struggled with. I always wanted to be able to write more, you know, great rock, pop songs, whatever you want to call it, like Tom Petty, you know, like the kind that he wrote, you know. It's hard to do with just an acoustic guitar. But anyway, I've got tons of these, you know, unrequited love song ballads, and I really like doing, there's one called Like a Rose.
Okay.
That's off my Rough Trade album that I really like to do, which I hardly ever do. One of my favorite ones is I Envy the Wind.
That's a great one.
I really like doing that one. And I like singing Blue. I like doing that one still a lot. Well, I mean, all of my songs, you know, I think most of them have stood the test of time, you know, so Fruits of My Labor is one that I enjoy. I like doing that one, you know.
This new record is so great, and it's like, for me, it has this dirty, earthy thing that's like, it's really soulful, but it's kind of nasty. It has like some punk rock anger. Like when I first heard it, I thought like Howlin' Wolf meets the Stooges.
I know, and I have repeated that to people. Like, I can't thank you enough, Jesse.
Well, we were listening in a bar where, you know, in LA, you go and you listen to your record in the car. You do the car test, and in New York, we always did the bar test with a few people. But
that meant so much to me though when you said that, because I have had to battle this whole, you know, kind of Americana, you know, alternative country, alternative, blah 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 thing, you know, for so long.
Well, coming out of Car Wheels, seeing that tour, which doing that album was so great, because I mean the record is amazing, and you told all those backstories, and you had the films. And the band really dug in them. You have such a great band from knowing the guys, but from, you know, watching as a fan and touring with them, you know, it's a 4-piece thing that just everyone brings it through. And, you know, going into the studio after that and making, you know, the new record, you did it with Ray Kennedy, right?
Yeah, Ray Kennedy. Yeah.
And you've done Steve Earle before, mostly all the Steve Earle records.
Yeah.
Right? And tell me how that came about. Like, I know you came off that tour and, you know, ended up in Nashville where you're living now, you know.
Yeah, we bought a little house in Nashville because we were here so much, going back and forth between LA and here. And, you know, it's just a lot easier to travel in and out of here. You know, it's closer to New York, you know, so just for a lot of reasons. But anyway, you know, we'd find ourselves every time we were in Nashville, from time to time, we'd run into Ray Kennedy, and, you know, he would say, well, you know, come by the studio. I want you to check my place out, and, you know, cut a couple of things, see what you think, you know. So it was a pretty organic process, the way it all happened. And so we were in between tours. And so I went in with the guys, and I had been working on some songs. So I had a bunch of songs, had some songs. And we set up some time to go in with Ray. Not really sure if we were going to do the whole album with him or anything, because we hadn't even been in the studio yet. So we went in, and I think the first song we cut was You Can't Rule Me. And, you know, Ray just has this, he's just a magician at the board. And I mean, we really didn't discuss much of, you know, I mean, he's got all this vintage gear, which of course helped. You know, he's got all these vintage guitars hanging on the walls. I didn't even have to bring my guitars in, you know, and we would talk about, well, which guitar and amplifier do you think would be good for this song, you know? And so I'd be playing like You Can't Rule Me, going, you know, whatever, 1950s guitar, going through this vintage amplifier. So right off the bat, it's got this crunchy sound. And just, so he just, I don't know, it was magic, you know, him at the board. And we were all like ready to go from being on the road and playing a lot. And the songs were, you know, the guys were just really into it. And we all kind of had this, you know, everybody's frustrated and angry and, you know, about stuff that's been going on for a while now. So, you know, we played and Ray was at the board. And the sound, it was probably his studio too. You know, you don't know what makes that is just that combination. It was just
that mojo. Yeah, there's definitely some kind of magic mojo in,
yeah,
in that room. But from working with you and your husband Tom Overby producing my record,
yeah,
you guys have a sense of when it's going right, and
yes,
you know, you were able to pick takes. Both you guys, we'd be in the tracking room and we'd be cutting 3 or 4, and we'd come in, and if you guys were like moving or like, that's the take. And I think you have an instinct, and that was one of the things that drew me to working with both you guys. So if you come down to the studio in Nashville and you're feeling that, I'm sure once you're feeling that, then you just want to keep going. And
exactly, yeah. And it's great when that happens, you know, when you have just the right people, the right combination of players and all the right ingredients, you know, and the songs are the right songs with the right musicians and the engineer in the studio, and it's boom, you know. And I think we did the tracks all together in about 14 days, I guess, of tracking, not all the way through, but we did a few, then we had to leave and go back out, and we came back, and, you know, so.
That's cool. That's great. That's the way it should be done. So we were talking about You Can't Rule Me. Would you be up for playing that one?
Yeah.
Right. Cool. First song on the album.
Mm-hmm. And this was inspired by a song by Memphis Mooney, with the same title. And I like to, of course, I want to give her credit, you know. I took it and, you know, put some new lyrics in it and rearranged it and everything. And so, okay. Here we go. Okay, wait a second, I'm sorry.
Take your time.
This thing.
We got no stress.
I know, right?
Hanging out at Berlin.
It's not like we have anywhere to go.
No, we got all the time in the world.
The man, I got a right to talk about what I see. Way too much is going wrong and it's right in front of me. You can't rule me. You can't rule me. You can't take my money and try to rule me too. You might expect me to follow, but I ain't gonna fall in line. I
tell you what, there's much I know. The dotted line ain't the sign. You can't rule me. You can't rule me. You can't take my soul and try to rule me too. You might beat me, you might cheat me, and try to make me change my mind. You might stick me, you might trick me. I'm gonna tell you one last time, you can't rule me. You can't rule me. You can't take my money and try to rule me too. You wanna go and tell me what's good for me, wanna tell me what I'm paid for. The game is fixed, it's plain to see, but I ain't playing no more. You can't rule me. You can't rule me. You can't take my money and try to rule me too. You can't rule me. You can't rule me. You can't take my soul and try to rule me too. You can't rule me. You can't rule me. You can't take my money and try to rule me too. You can't rule me. You can't rule me. You can't take my money and try to rule me too. You can't take my soul and try to rule me too.
Wow. Thank you. It's great. So that's off the record, Good Souls, Better Angels, Lucinda Williams' new album. And it's like, I don't know, I think with lyrics like that, you know, you've been around rock music and any kind of stuff, it can sometimes be really, or I've seen it be really male dominated. How do you feel, you know, being a woman around men in bands all these years? I mean, I think a lot of women and men look up to you for, you know, just being a person that's outspoken, you know, you have some foolishness and man without a soul, and you know, you wear your heart on your sleeve in a time when, you know, as much as there's people standing up for each other, there's still a lot of sexism. Has that been a thing you've had to fight through, or?
Well, you know, I was raised to not really, you know, it never occurred to me, you know, that I couldn't do whatever it is I wanted to do, kind of thing.
Good.
You know, so, but I mean, you know, I dealt with the sexism thing probably not any differently than any other woman, just in terms of the day-to-day thing. I mean, you know, and socially and all. I mean, I remember, you know, when I very first started out and guys would say like, well, you're pretty good for a chick, you know, that kind of thing. And, you know, there was always kind of the boys club, you know, like when I first moved to LA, and, you know, it was all guys. I mean, most musicians are guys. So, you know, a lot of times I'd find myself the only girl, you know, and with a bunch of guys, musicians and all. And, you know, I think that's when, I mean, but it wasn't just that, it was also learning how to, I mean, when I was living in New York that year, you know, I said I played anywhere, and, you know, it didn't matter if people were talking or whatever. I remember playing in I don't know, some kind of crazy punk club or something. And it was, you know, I learned early on, if I'm going to get people to listen to me, I'm going to have to, you know, be kind of edgy and, you know, get their attention. And it's not going to be by sitting there, you know, like a little soft little girl, you know. And that's when I was, you know, I discovered Robert Johnson and started singing his stuff and, you know, getting into blues and everything, you know. And that was, I don't know, I just learned how to be as good as they were, or better.
To have a swagger,
You know?
combination to be a great writer and write songs, but also, you know, you have like this Keith Richards kind of just, just this energy, and so many
Right.
female and male songwriters that I know, look at you and it's an inspiration. And with this record, you've gotten older in time, you've made so many records, and it's more fucking young and badass, and like it has like a teenage energy, yet there's somebody that's wise. And when I saw you sing the title track on the tour we did, Good Souls, Better Angels, like there's moments where you just like clicked into this other gospel, like channeling. And I only saw that a couple times at shows, but in this particular song, there's a moment you just step back by the drums and then you start singing. You're able to go and channel some things that is super special. And knowing you all these years, it was like another side that I was like, you have this thing and this magic.
I think it's a combination of the, yin yang, male, female, feminine, masculine energies, that, we all need to possess and balance out, because they both have their beautiful things. And, I've got that edginess kind of, fuck you thing, like you're talking about. But then, like I always think about Van Morrison. He, they call him I don't know what, spiritual drunk or something, that he's kind of mean and,
I got that when I met you, and I think you had some records around on the bus, and you're getting to know somebody. You can always look at their music and get a sense who they are. And you had this Morrison record that I didn't know called Common One, which is very spiritual.
Oh God, yeah, that's what I mean.
And I saw that, and I went.
This is such a pain in the ass, and he drinks too much and all the rest of it. But then you hear him sing this stuff, and it's just like this total, ethereal, kind of thing. Spiritual and all that. And so I have that part of me too, but.
Yeah, I mean, and the beautiful songs are great. And like the sad, to be able to take it down and take it up, like to rock and also whisper and break hearts in that way is great. And I, not to compare anything, but just to get the idea of what you're saying, I took somebody to see you and some friends were there at a show once, and someone said, wow, she's kind of like, Wendy O. Williams meets Iggy Pop on stage. And that was one I didn't hear. I was like,
oh my God, that's awesome.
Your energy and your movements and your mannerisms. And this is somebody that I
ever thought Wendy O. Williams
meets Iggy Pop, just in the way,
I know.
Yeah, I don't know what it was, but I took it and I was like, I get it. I never looked at it that way, but there's so much
the Delta Blues stuff. Go back and listen to that stuff that Robert Johnson was doing, and these other guys. I mean, it's the same place. It comes to the same place as the punk, thing and all that.
Well, I think this record, this record really taps into that.
Yeah.
We only got a couple more minutes, but I have two more questions. And but thank you so much for
this has been great. I'm honored to have been your first. I'm excited to see who else you have on the different shows.
Actually, next week I have another great woman that we had dinner with. Debbie Harry's doing the next week's show.
Yay!
Yeah, and then we had that great dinner at John. She went out to the car and got the books, her autobiography, and brought it back. And I was like, that was like classic.
She's
like
so sweet.
Holiday in New York. But I guess, the other two things I have is just wanted to touch upon, I wouldn't have probably, a lot of things that happened with my record, which I'm so grateful for you and Tom working on Sunset Kids and our collaborations. It's probably
great.
One of my favorites. And I don't want to make this too much about me, but it might not have happened if you didn't say, hey, do you want to come to LA and see Tom Petty play? We're opening for Tom Petty. And I came out with Michael and we went to see you guys. You were doing 3 nights and we ended up going the last night just because of schedule.
Yeah.
And you guys played an hour and, I was still trying to figure out how I felt about Los Angeles for many years, but I have a love-hate thing, but
which we all understand.
Yeah. And the sun was coming down at the Hollywood Bowl and the stars were coming out and it was just one of the most magical gigs I've been to. And you guys killed it. And I went backstage and I said, how's it going? And you said, Tom's a little under the weather. And so I was worried, and they came out, and that was the best show I ever saw. And it said so much to me that they played LA, their hometown, and asked you to open all those shows, you know,
Right. I know, it was such an honor.
Yeah. And then after that, you know, we met and talked about doing the record. And of course, Tom passed, and no one, you know, ever expected that. And it's still heartbreaking and to say the words. But yeah, that night and just that whole thing, anything that you remember from those shows, or just of Tom, or I know obviously you changed the locks and you're friends with him, but anything you want to add to that?
You know, every time I start talking about him, I just want to, it just, I don't know what it is. I feel like we were just getting to really, you know, become good friends. I mean, you know, where I could call him a friend, you know, I mean, he's one of those people who's, you talk about somebody who's open and real, and, you know, I mean, you know, it was really important for me to, as it would be for you, or to see one of your musical heroes be like that, you know, and be able to sit backstage with them, and, you know, I remember we went to see him. He was doing that, the mud, at the Ryman. What was it? Mud Crutch tour, remember?
Yeah.
Yeah, we went to see that, went backstage and hung out with him backstage. And, you know, he likes to smoke pot, and yeah, I don't smoke anymore, but the only times I, you know, would take a little bit of hit of pot was with Tom Petty or Neil Young. Because if you're with Neil Young or Tom Petty, they're smoking a joint, you know, you kind of want to.
Can't say no. It's a religious experience.
Yeah. But anyway, so we went backstage to see Tom at the Ryman, and he was back there by himself, and just, you know, he's so down, he was, see, I'm still talking about him in the present tense, so down to earth and real, and, you know, but he was, you know, he had a little pot, and, you know, and I said, you know, can I have a little, you know, he goes, okay, well, be careful though, because it's kind of strong, you know, and he had that, you know, he cared. Yeah. He was real, and he cared. And, you know, nobody knew that, you know, when we opened up for him at the Hollywood Bowl, that it was going to be the last time. And his manager came up to me after we had gone on, and before Tom went on, and he said, you want to say hi to Tom? And I said, well, I don't want to bother him before the show. And he said, no, come, you know, come with me, and come. Thank God. I always think about this, you know, because who knew? And so I went with Tom's manager, and, you know, we knocked on the door, and, you know, he said, well, Tom's kind of struggling with a cold, and opened the door to his dressing room, and Tom was, of course, he's smoking a cigarette, you know, and he's got a cough drop in his mouth. You know, that's the thing, you know, I mean, it was just, you know, and he hugged me, and he came outside his room, and then, you know, we hugged, and somebody took this amazing photograph of us, which I cherish to this day. And, you know, that was the last time I was able to speak to him or anything.
Yeah, so sad. You can feel the sweetness that you're talking about in his music.
Yes,
writing.
Very sweet. And you know what else? It's the Southern connection.
Yeah.
We connected on that in that way. And it's one of the reasons I love doing his songs, Southern accents. You know,
I saw you do that at Largo with Ben Montench. You came
yes.
That. He was on piano, and it was just that long after all this had happened, and it was really special to be there for that.
Yeah.
Well, my last thing is, I don't know, I kind of asked this to other people that I've chatted with. You know, you've lived this life, and you obviously are still hungry and still, you know, doing records that are more intense and real than ever, and have this, you know, I see how you tour and how you work, and you're deep in it. Are you able to sit back, you know, now you're in Nashville, you're in LA, and just, you know, there's people that appreciate it, and be able to take that into yourself and go, like, I've done this and other people have gotten something from it? Are you able to give yourself some kind of credit and appreciate it at that moment?
Yeah.
Yeah.
You know, the I'm blessed moment. Yeah. Sometimes I have to remind myself, you know, I mean, I'm just like anybody else, you know, I have my stresses and my anxiety and all my human foibles and all the rest of it, you know. So, but yeah, of course. Yeah.
Good. Well, you deserve it all. You've given us so many gifts, and it's great to see your face. And thanks for coming by the final self-distancing. I don't need a mask.
I wanted to ask about how Bob Strauss is doing.
Oh, well, he's running for president, actually, Bob Strauss. So 2020, I figure, you know, this guy's got a mind of his own. There's not a lot of wars going on. So Bob Strauss is, I think he's coming out in a little bit, actually, to talk to everybody and stuff. My got no work, tour manager to the stars, but he's hanging in there. He's staying healthy, and he's president for 2020.
Right.
I hope everybody votes for Bob Strauss because I need to support the guy, you know.
Okay.
All right. I love you.
I love you too.
Thank you.
Thank you. This has been great. I really enjoyed it.
Yeah, it was really great. Hold on, folks. This is the fine art of self-distancing. Yes, Bob Strauss is going to be coming out soon to see you guys and talk a little bit. Next week, we'll be here on Saturday, and it goes through We Are Here. And you can make donations, and you can do that. I think Jillian has the button there. We're helping out the bars, Berlin, which is one of the ones, live music venue that I've been involved in. And thank you guys. And next week is Debbie Harry. So we got a little more, and we'll see you next week.
Peace and love.